Hi again. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the minor PRs and also the tiny PRs which I did during the mentorship rather. So let's begin. The very first PR that I would like to talk about is this one: incorporated changes from PR number 38 on Fulcro-incubator. So let me tell you a little bit about the incubator. The incubator itself is sort of a testing ground for the actual changes which are like, it's sort of a playground for the upcoming features. If they make sense, they get included into the main source code. Otherwise, they are dropped. So changes, one of the things about Fulcro incubator at this point is that it was in Fulcro 2, and to the best of my knowledge, it's still in Fulcro 2. However, the lead developer did mention that he intends to bring this one out again, resurrect this project for Fulcro 3. Uh, so uh, there was a PR on this Fulcro 2 based incubator, and the PR basically added certain things or worked on the dynamic routing. However, you will notice that the imports, well, it's not mentioned here. Mm, you will notice that this class and this namespace, not class, namespace. This namespace does not exist in Fulcro 3. So what I had to do is basically port this to the Fulcro 3 source code. And an interesting thing, an interesting fact about the Fulcro 2 to Fulcro 3 transition is that, like many good projects, there are many sub libraries within this project. Like, okay, so let me put it this way: if you're working on a project for a long time, you would eventually end up creating usable libraries within this one project, and then slowly, if other people find it useful, these are extracted away from the main source code. So Eden query language, as I've mentioned earlier, is one such thing, right? So it was completely extracted from two libraries, PathHome and Fulcro 2 to be precise. And this meant that some of the functions, some of the basically functions did no longer exist in the Fulcro source code. However, they now exist in a different form in different in extracted libraries. So what I had to do is basically port over that code from Fulcro 2 to Fulcro 3, and this is how it looked. I really just needed to uh, port these things to, for example, equal this Eden query language. Okay, let me talk a little bit about this Eden query language. This builds upon the generalization for SQL and GraphQL. The facility is there in PathHome to be precise, but this is just the data expression language. And to be more precise, this is basically just closure data structures, vectors, maps and vectors, vector of vectors, that's it, and scalars. Yeah. So now that we have a separate library for which is the go-to place for all of the query related functions. Sorry, query related functions. So these were ported. I had to port the Fulcro 2 incubator PR into the Fulcro 3 version of it. So yeah, this one got merged, and there wasn't a lot of communication about it because it was not so much work actually. I got to know about the changes in the namespaces specifically because of this PR, because I had to understand, okay, this namespace now has become its own library, or this namespace has been moved to the algorithm namespace, or within the main source code, things like that. So this was a good experience and exposure. Other than that, I would like to talk about. I'm going to start with relatively bigger PRs, and then I'll move on to the tiny PRs, and then in the next video maybe I'll talk only about the PRs which didn't work out. Yeah, so let's move on. So PathHome is a project which is very complementary in design and intent to Fulcro, because these two projects really fit together very well. This project is specifically about processing Eden query language requests. It means that this forms the networking or the networking. Okay, this heavily informs your data in transit, uh, to put it forward in a more generic way. So this means that whenever you ask data, whenever you query data from one server or n number of servers in a distributed system, even if it is a REST API, it will help you treat that as a graph API. So this is the power of PathHome, and moreover, it adapts to REST APIs as well as GraphQL APIs. So yeah, and like Fulcro itself, this is also a dense source code. However, one of the best things about this project is that even if you have even if so there are no breaking changes in this project. Like this is a very interesting fact, because I found a video by Wilker Lucio around which was shot around 2 years ago, and by himself, of course, and every single piece of code within that still worked fine. And that was as a beginner, as someone who was trying to learn PathHome, this was really nice. But it gives rise to identifiers or an API which houses features functions like uh, process query and then process query 2, so things like that. But this was the first time I actually uh, see a library really progressing over a span of years without making breaking changes. Like, this is wonderful. So I was talking about contributions to this. So to this one, I basically tried to contribute. I was trying to going through the code source code, and I was trying to understand this library better. However, I could find many issues with the documentation. So what I did is that I started PR for the documentation specifically. Generally, if I want to gain some momentum regarding a project on GitHub especially, I start with PRs, specifically documentation PRs, and then I understand how what is the project governance like, how do people react, or what are the things I could probably focus more upon. But always I think starting off with the documentation PR never hurts, always helps. So yeah, this is what I did. Let me show the PRs. So this is the very first PR, and this is the first PR in this video series until now that didn't really work out. But all the other PRs you see here which have been merged are basically because of this first PR. So yeah, as I told you, the documentation had some not minor, but basically prose related issues, not code related. Some of them were code related also, I think. So what I did is that I went through the entire documentation, and as I was making my way through, whatever issues I found, I corrected them, uh, and I was taking care of the prose part, the English part on one side, and the code part on the other side. And this generated basically 600 lines of code, if this tells you anything. However, uh, later on I found out that Wilker has already started working on version 2 of the documentation, which basically was the same doc but structured differently. So in this case, I definitely should have communicated with him first. However, later on, it wasn't that big of a deal uh, because all I had to do is to basically uh, port over the changes from one section to the newer version 2 of the documentation. And git patch helped a lot. Git diff and git patch. So yeah, that saved the day basically. But mostly this was my first contribution to the PathHome project. It wasn't very big, of course, but yeah, I was just gaining momentum. After that, all of these PRs are basically moving over or porting over the code from this PR, to the other PRs. And notice, this first PR was very big in size, and I had a bad feeling about this always. Whenever you are working with a big sized PR, maybe it will work out, maybe it will not. I think smaller PRs are definitely better, but for some projects you can't help it. Anyways, so all of these four PRs, they were smaller, much smaller in size, and that's that. Uh, so, however, once I understood the PathHome project a little bit better, I could I was combing through other projects from PathHome on GitHub. However, mostly I could only find projects by Wilker himself, and one of those is related to his presentation on I think Closure Conch and Dutch Closure Days, I think. So uh, I noticed when I was going through the video and the presentation, I noticed one thing, that there was in the video he used dependent projects. For example, to present this Conch 2018 demo, he used two things. The project itself relies on functions exported by these two other namespaces, not namespaces, even actually projects. So one of this was not even published. So this meant that I could not really make this work because this wasn't independent. I could not make this work because it didn't have access to workspaces. Let me show you what is workspaces. Yeah, here. So this, think of storybooks in the JavaScript land, and it's pretty much this, but you could also do generative testing using this, and you could see what are the parameters upon which the UI breaks, and there are very nice features around this. However, this was not set up in the other two projects. So these were, even if YouTube one was available, I could not really make it work at the time. So I asked him if he could publish the SpaceX project first, and then he said, "Well, you are the first to notice it." This was nice. Uh, so I did that. Uh, okay, after I had access to the SpaceX project, what I did is I completed the project. Like, I gave it finishing touches, added workspaces, etc., everything. And let me show you the PR. Because I wanted this project to be completely independent of other projects. It's nice if other projects can also rely on this, but it should also be able to work independently, right? So this is basically what I did. This was, I think, more of a setup kind of thing, but I learned how to make workspaces work. I learned how to organize the class path properly because this was a completely separate project. And in Java land, we talk about class path a lot. So yeah, minor things, nothing major. But this one was a little bit bigger, but mostly I just ported over code from other older projects, specifically the project Spotify PathHome. So yeah, that worked. And then the project was, well, at least it was easier to get started with. Uh, so that's that about the SpaceX part, and something similar in the YouTube as well, YouTube Connect example. Let me show you. Pretty much the same thing in this one. Sorry. Yeah, so I was also trying to understand how he did the tunneling from localhost into a proper web browser, but he was not using the localhost for this. Later on, I found out that, well, now it's no longer needed. So even if it was in the presentation, now there is definitely a better way. So I think talking helps. Definitely. We were also communicating over Slack channels. Uh, yeah, so basically this. Let me open this. Not this, not this, not this. Depths, Eden, package JSON, workspaces again, and that's it. This is basically what I did in this one. Moving on, now let's talk about the pull requests on the crucial canonical documentation for Fulcro. Also, by now you definitely understand that I was also making my way through the book at the same time, and whatever smaller things or typos or outdated code I could notice in the book, I would update it and have it open up as a PR. So one of the things is like added cat set to HTML. This was a very minor change because it wasn't like I just added cat set in the meta. However, it stopped one of the errors, and this error happens because of a library in closure script, which is BD, which is bi-directional routing for server side as well as client side. So yeah, so that got missed earlier in the template as well as the book, so I added that. I was experimenting with things all the time. Other than that, what can I talk about? So when the beta version launched, there were certain things which I could find which needed to be added. Yeah. So this was just basically typos, nothing more in this one. However, in this one, I think, yeah, I corrected the snippets as well because these were mostly based on a Fulcro 2 namespaces. These were not ported, so I did that. Yeah, we'll talk about this one in the next video. Apart from this, we have talked about PathHome. Yeah, on this one, yeah. So I was trying to make this work to get PathHome, etc. PathHome examples work properly, but this was not ported for Fulcro 3 at the time, and I found out that, well, of course, there is an example there, but the dependencies of the project and the something was missing, and let me show you that. Something was missing which was blocking me from getting this work. However, later on, once I found this out, Wilker helped me, and then we got this working. And specifically, because we got this working, I could make progress with the connect YouTube as well as connect SpaceX APIs. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about those APIs. SpaceX offers a REST API. Here is that. However, when you deal with the SpaceX API via PathHome layer, you actually talk to it as if it's a GraphQL API. It's a Graph API basically. So let me show you a sample query here. It will give you perhaps it might give you a better idea of the kind of query we do. So this is a join. It joins it tells the PathHome parser that, okay, figure out as many networking calls or cache some of the calls, like be intelligent about it, but from all the calls, from all the launches by SpaceX, give me only the flight number and the video length. So it's the PathHome's job to figure out how many more requests it needs to make. Should it batch it? Should it send it in parallel? Should it send it sequentially? Should it look up the local storage? Should it check the cache? So it's PathHome's job. Not we don't have to worry about it, and we can treat this REST API as a graph API. So that's why PathHome definitely complements Fulcro better, because Fulcro itself is designed around the idea of normalized database, and PathHome provides the tree of data. So remember we talked about tree path to DB path, that function that links directly to these two projects. So that's that. Apart from that, I was also working my way through trying to find small ways even using which I could contribute to the project at the time. So one of the things was Yarn, because let me share Shadow CLJS, share a little bit about Shadow CLJS. If you have a Node.js or JavaScript background and you come to ClojureScript, like this land is completely foreign. It has its own compiler, it has its own syntax, like quite different. It has its own philosophy. Oh, I think this one is broken right now. It is broken. It's link. Let's hope the other things work. User guide for this project is also very big. You will see. So everything. So I had to make my way through this as well. I closed that. So the reason I opened this up and I was talking about the transition from JavaScript knowledge, the JavaScript and Node.js knowledge, and how to apply that to ClojureScript ecosystem. There are three main compilers, actually, not compilers but toolchain. The first one is vanilla ClojureScript. It has an inbuilt, it is a compiler, right? The other thing is Figwheel. The third, the most recent of these is Shadow CLJS, and it helps you, it runs a server in the background which dynamically compiles it runs a dev server basically, and it dynamically compiles and hot reloads only the code which has changed. So as you can see, it is very extensive. When I got a better hold of this, I was able to understand or simplify the experience of getting started with the template for people especially coming from the Node background. So for example, client main, this runs the Shadow CLJS in watch mode with the main build, and then client CLJS, it runs the CLJS REPL connected to the main build. You can have as many builds simultaneously as you want, but this I felt that it is best that the template provides settings only for the vanilla and the most frequently used namespace. So you could, instead of typing this all the time, now you could simply do npm run server npm start. This seems very familiar, right, to anyone coming from Node background. But okay, one interesting fact here, I used to rely a lot on Spacemacs, mostly because of my background in data science. A lot of Python, R, etc., and Spacemacs is really fun for that, and even for Clojure. However, when you come specifically to ClojureScript, things change. I feel that support of Intellij, and to be more precise, Cursive, is much better than using the vanilla Spacemacs for it. Unless you want to invest a lot more time in learning about Spacemacs, I would say just get started with Intellij and Cursive, and start working on your thing. So that transition I made during this project itself. So and now I've been working with Intellij and its various plugins like PyCharm, WebStorm, etc. All of these could be used within Intellij Ultimate. So yeah, that's a very good product. It eats up your RAM, but it's a very good product. So yeah, I basically added that, and I don't think that the lead developer of Fulcro felt that. Well, I think that the lead developer of Fulcro didn't feel the need to do this, because he basically relies on Intellij and does his customizations on Intellij itself, rather than working or providing things based on the command line, which I can understand. However, well, this felt to be like, for anyone who's getting started with this, it feels a lot nicer if you could have something familiar in this world as well, in ClojureScript land as well. So yeah, that was that. Other than that, just smaller minor things, like okay, so this one is not the Fulcro template was part of the Fulcro legacy organization, and recently it was either forced post or something, so it doesn't have so many pull requests as of now, but hopefully this will change in future. This PR I will talk about in future, but remember, when I talk about this, okay, well, I'll just mention it that time as well. Yeah, so also I did a lot of tiny things. You could see that okay, this one has an interesting story. I'll just talk a little bit about it. This one has, maybe I've linked to the issue. Nope, no, not linked. Yeah, so when I was trying to contribute to the project when it was in Fulcro legacy, or when it was still in incubation, one of the problems with this was that there were no, well, there were tests, but there was no test runner or automated CI/CD pipeline for this, even though it existed in the currently, or at the time, uh, public release. However, for Fulcro 3 it wasn't there, and I felt that it might be better, or at least it would make me feel much better to be able to run the tests properly and see how things are working out or not. So not this, yeah, this one. So I started this conversation hoping that Tony would do something about it, or especially maybe if there is something that I could do about it. And I felt, uh, well, I think that Tony really took this on and got started even before I could do anything about it. So basically the tests, or the Circle CI configuration to be precise, needed to be copied over from Fulcro 2 to Fulcro 3, and then they needed to be customized or upgraded for Fulcro 3. So that was it. But uh, remaining part was just adding batches, whether Fulcro 3 pipeline is working currently or not. So yeah, nothing much. But I was taking a lot of interest in the project at the time, and yeah, small things, like I was really focused more on getting something done, and gaining the momentum, having a flow to it. That okay, I find something, uh, I work on it, I open a pull request, and this process, this circle. I wanted to get into this flow of identifying things, doing something about it, and then getting started. So this helped a lot. We have talked about Fulcro, we have talked about Fulcro template, we have talked about template, we have talked about the dev guide, we have talked about PathHome, we have talked about Workspaces. Yeah, so I would say we are pretty much done for this video. In the next video, I will talk about the not so good parts, but that's part of an experience, so I think it's fine. Anyways, I hope that you have learned something about maybe Fulcro and how to contribute, or like preferences even regarding the text editor or IDEs or something. This would be really amazing, and let me know if you have any questions. Other than that, I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.